Today, we're going to talk about independent and dependent variables. In many research designs, variables are often designated as either an independent variable or a dependent variable. There are a lot of other terms that people use, like predictor variable or response variable, and so forth, but we'll cover those in a later video. So for now, we'll just stick with independent and dependent. We'll actually start with the dependent variable, which is our outcome variable, our variable of interest. We want to see how the dependent variable changes depending on the value of the independent variable. Now, we call it an independent variable because it varies independently of the dependent variable. The value of the dependent variable, in contrast, is dependent on the value of the independent variable. So, think of a light switch and a light bulb. We flip the light switch to see the result in the light bulb. So in this scenario, the light switch is our independent variable, which we manipulate up or down to see the outcome in the light bulb, which is our dependent variable. As another example, let's say that we're interested in risk-taking behavior. So that'll be our variable of interest, our dependent variable. And let's say we're curious whether alcohol consumption makes people more likely to engage in risky behavior. So our dependent variable is risky behavior, and our independent variable is alcohol consumption. In this case, we're not asking whether or not someone consumes alcohol depends on their risky behavior, right? But we are asking whether their risk-taking depends on whether or not they consumed alcohol. That's why, in this case, alcohol is the independent variable and the risky behavior is the dependent variable. So you can think of the independent-dependent relationship with the sentence, the impact of blank on blank. And in the first slot, we'll put the independent variable, and in the second slot, we'll go the dependent variable. In our first example, we weren't investigating the impact of risky behavior on alcohol consumption, but instead we are looking at the impact of alcohol consumption on risky behavior. So it's important to note that whether a variable is an independent variable or a dependent variable depends entirely upon the research question. So let's take depression as an example. Depression is a common problem in society, and people who are severely depressed often try to find ways to reduce depression. Perhaps maybe they'll take some medication prescribed by their doctor to reduce depression. So if our research question is, does drug A reduce depression? Then depression is the dependent variable. However, if our research question is, does depression cause you to sleep longer? Then depression is the independent variable. So you have to look at the research question to know which variable is which. Okay? There are also scenarios like feedback loops where both variables can cause each other. So we might have a research question where does depression cause more social media use? In which case, the independent variable is depression and the dependent variable is social media use. But then we might also have a research question where does social media use cause depression? In which case, the independent variable is social media use and the dependent variable is depression, and they're flipped. So to wrap everything up, we have an independent variable, which is typically manipulated by the researcher to see the outcome on the dependent variable, which changes or doesn't change based on the value of the independent variable. And to know which is which, you do need to look at the research question. Okay, that's it. Make sure to check out all of our other videos.